Hey everybody, this is Andrew Stoeten, and you are listening to The Walk-Off with Scott and Adam.
So pleased to be joined by today's guest, Toronto Blue Jays insider, formerly of The Athletic, and you can now subscribe to his newsletter and articles on Subtracks. Andrew Stoeten, welcome to The Walk-Off, man. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. Insider, I don't know, Substack, just to
Yeah.
get that right.
Substack, right? There we go. We don't want
Yeah,
to, yeah.
but yeah, thanks for having me. Again, not sure I'm an insider. I'm sitting here in my house in Peterborough, but I'll do what I can.
Well, either way, I'm a big fan on Twitter, man. You have just the right amount of funny combined with baseball knowledge. It's great. At
Well,
Andrew
thank you so
Stoeten for
much.
those listening who want to check it out here. How has your transition been from Athletic to Substacks? I
Uh,
know going from going uh, independent always has its obstacles to overcome. How has that been for you?
going independent, not the first time, not usually the term they use when someone does when you're told not to keep working for a company, but yeah, it's been great actually. I loved all the people on the Canadian side of the Athletic that I worked with. That was not my favorite thing that happened in the last year, but it's been really nice to not have a boss and to
Yeah.
uh, and not that my bosses were ever like a problem at all, but it's just, working at my own pace is very, very nice. And the response has been great. Still looking for more people to sign up with paid subscriptions, but everything I write is free, and that model seems to be working. I was kind of worried at first, like I was behind a paywall at the Athletic for a long time,
Mm-hmm.
and was not. I would rather have more people be able to read everything that I do, and so this seems to be working. That I can make my money based on people subscribing and still not, cut people off from it. So that's been a really nice thing.
Well, it's funny. I know you said going independent isn't exactly how you would describe it, but like I'm a professional stand-up comic, and I know there's two ways you can do it in Canada. You can either work with Yuck Yucks, where you have to sign with them and you can only work with them, or you can go independent, which is the route
Mm-hmm.
I have gone. And there's more work available, but it is way more work to find it. Right? Is
Right.
that kind of where you're at too, where you're just trying to build up your fan base? I guess.
To be honest, no, because I've just sort of, I mean, that's why I was at the Athletic in the first place, because I was a known quantity and I've been
Right.
around for years and years. Um, and I went independent after the Score fired me, and I went independent. I had my own website for a while, andrewstoten.com. That was like 2016, I think, and this is just sort of a new iteration of that. And basically, my job is I have an audience for Blue Jays stuff, and I, over the years, have basically licensed that audience to different companies, and at times just done it myself. And so it's not really all that different. It's just a
I
different
worked in
website.
radio for 7 years, so I'm well aware of being fired by media companies. Yeah.
Yeah. But no, it's been great, like I say, and no, it hasn't been terribly different. It's been very, very nice. I'm enjoying it and hope to do it for a very long time in this way where everybody can read it for free.
Glad to hear it. Let's do some Blue Jays here. I did wish to start with yesterday's loss in the second doubleheader before we take a more level headed approach to where this team is at. I know this year I have stood up for Charlie Montoyo on numerous times. People like to blame him for losses, but yesterday's loss felt like it was more on him than not. How did you feel about Charlie going back to Chatwood in the seventh already after seeing him a little bit shaky and not hit his control in the sixth? Were you surprised even after Chatwood struggled that there was no arm warming up in the pen?
Yes. I mean, I think that was the thing. Like in the sixth, he looked like he didn't have it, and Charlie had used that as a reason a week earlier for why he did pull him for Travis
Mm-hmm.
Bergen, which was another decision that
Yes.
really blew up in his face. And so I thought, clearly Chatwood was struggling with it. We heard on the broadcast that he'd been working on a bullpen on Friday to get more online to the plate, like to throw more strikes. Like this has been an issue. It's not resolved. It showed itself in the sixth inning that it wasn't resolved. He got the job done, but obviously there were concerns there. And I was fine with going to him in the seventh, to be honest. But to do
Me
it
too.
without a parachute, without a guy warming up and ready to come in, was ludicrous. I don't understand. I do understand maybe why he wanted to do that, like to show Chatwood that he trusted him, but that's the wrong move, and it clearly showed itself why. And I'm with you. Like, I think a lot of times Charlie gets, and not just Charlie, but any manager gets
Of
unfair
course.
blame when losses happen, and people really love to be able to point the finger at something, and usually it's more about players not executing than it is about anything the manager did. But that one was real tough because it was apparent at the start of the sixth that he was not right. It was definitely apparent in the seventh, and it took forever for them to even get somebody warming, and they just let him have that inning. And anybody could have predicted from like the first few pitches, I think, what was going to happen, and they let it.
What killed me was that he didn't even give himself the option. You know, like Chatwood walks the bases loaded, and he didn't even have the option to go to the pen because no one was warming. Like, then they had to frantically get Castro up. Listen, I normally can defend Charlie's way of thinking. This is like the first time of the year maybe that I can think of where I'm just like, I don't understand why you wouldn't have at least given yourself the option to go to the pen.
Yeah, I'm in that camp too, and I think it's unfortunate the way that a lot of people, they're not there because they've decided a long time ago that Charlie is terrible and an idiot, and the evidence mounts with every time he does something like this. But I think this was, like you say, like really the real most egregious thing I've seen him do this year. And there have been things in the past, and I'm not, I'm certainly not saying if every manager became a free agent right now, Charlie would not be the first one I would choose. He may not be the 20th one I would choose, but I don't think it's as bad as people have in their minds sometimes. But this was indefensible.
Yeah. Okay, let's take a little bit more of a step back here. If you knew nothing of the injuries this team has dealt with this season, and we're told March 31st of this year that May 31st, this team would be 27-25, a game and a half back of a wild card spot, would you have been all right with that? Like, is this team somewhat on pace for what it's trying to accomplish?
I think so. Yeah. I mean, especially as you say, without the injuries being a factor there, without knowing, because I think they've done really well considering the injuries. I mean, it would depend on whether I'd looked at the schedule too or not, right? Because the schedule has really been against them so far, which I think is a testament to how good they've been. And some of it was smoke and mirrors a bit, I think. And I think some of that we saw on Sunday with Charlie and going to chat with like the roster is not manager proof right now, right? Like the options that he had with Dolis and Romano having pitched in the first game of the day, if they're not available, there's Chatwood who can't throw strikes, and then there's who are you closing out the game with Joe Pyaps instead?
Yeah,
or there's not a lot of great options there right now, and that I think is shown in the last few weeks. But they got through so many tough injuries and such a tough period and did so well in April and early May that, I think you have to be happy with where they are right now and feel good about the platform that they have to continue to go forward. The rotation looks like it's finding some stability. I think some guys, Hatch is going to come back. There's going to be hopefully Baraki soon. There's going to be some guys in the bullpen who maybe you do trust to get to close out a game when it's obvious Tyler Chatwood isn't throwing strikes. And I think, and then you have a ton of Baltimore and like Seattle and a bunch of like games that they could pick up a lot of wins coming up. So I think they're still in good shape. All things considered, absolutely, yeah.
And you're right. All things considered, they are in good shape. But one thing this team has yet to do is get really hot. Like they've played well, but whenever it looks like they're on the verge, something like yesterday happens where they just wind up giving a win away and eliminating a streak. Is this something to worry about, that they can't quite sustain dominance? Or do you think that that's just a hump they're eventually going to get over?
I think that they'll probably have a bit of a run on them at some point. I mean, it is tough. It's real tough to look at what Tampa's doing right now, because I don't think that's as great a team as they're playing. And they certainly probably should have lost 4 games last week to the Jays and didn't. So that would have changed that whole narrative a lot. I don't know, but I also just 2 months. It's hard to say that's enough time to have seen whether they're going to it's a long season. I think they're a good team. I don't know if they necessarily have to have like a 10-game winning streak in them, but I think that with if Stripling is as good as he's looked the last couple of times with the mechanical changes, if Manoa is as good as he looked in his debut and has looked all spring, there's no reason they can't have a real nice run in them. I think, yeah, like those are big pieces that have changed, and we won't really see the results because they're only pitching every fifth day. But and then Stripling, maybe you move him back to the bullpen when someone like Pearson finally gets right, or Hatch, whatever. But yeah, I'm not terribly worried about that stuff, I guess.
I like that you bring up that we're only 2 months in. Do you think that last year's 60-game season screwed with the fan base headspace a little bit? Like, I just have seen so much panic from so many Jays fans, and I look at this team and I'm like, this is not a team worth panicking about right now. Like, it's fine.
Yeah, I'm again agreeing with you, but I would also say that this happens every year, no matter what, whether it was preceded by a 60-game season or not. People tend to forget
that there's 162 games.
Yeah, or the fact that like a 90-win team loses 40% of the time, right? Like it's there's a lot of losing and a lot of bad things happen in the sport, and it's tough to give away your Saturday afternoon or Sunday afternoon to like 4 hours of a game and just be punched in the gut at the end. And so I get why people get mad about that.
Yeah.
But I try to keep those sort of level perspective, which, the people in the industry say is necessary. But obviously it's being a fan is different than being Charlie Montoyo, having to be positive every single day.
Yeah, for sure. But let's talk positives for a second here. Marcus Semien, I mean, the guy is having himself a May. His offensive numbers are absolutely ridiculous right now. And I've heard so many opinions on him over the last week as to where the Jays go with him. Sign him. Some people are saying sign him long term. Give him a qualifying offer. Let him walk. Who cares? Groshans and Martin are coming. I've even heard people be like, let's trade him at the deadline for prospects. Fans are ridiculous, and really we should just be enjoying what Semien is bringing to this team right now. Now, obviously, that's not what fans do, and that's not what we're going to do here. How do you think this tenure, Semien's tenure with the Jays play out, and what would you do with Marcus Semien?
Not knowing the budget, it's hard to say, right? Like it seemed at the end of the winter that they were gearing up, and they didn't go after Taijuan Walker. They didn't go after any pitchers with like additional term because they seemed to be looking for as much flexibility financially next winter because there's such a big free agent class, and that's partly why they went after Semien on a 1-year deal. Mm-hmm. So if I'm comfortable with the fact that they can be real players on the free agent market, then I think it's the qualifying offer route, provided they're actually in a playoff race. Like I'm not gonna go in lightly to a trade of Semien at the trade deadline, and I don't think we should even have to talk about it at this stage. But if things do go badly, then yeah, you obviously that's a great asset to move, and then you do that. But I think that they would have to be like way back for them to do that because there's just too much baseball left at the trade deadline to think that they would be out of it unless they're like
they'd have
a
to
real
face plant. Yeah
and I think the qualifying offer is nice. I would love to see them sign him. I think that of any of the guys who are free agents, free agent shortstops that are coming up next year, he's probably having the best season so far, and hopefully he's seeing we've seen this a lot that Robbie Ray came back, and guys really, once they get to Toronto, they sort of get over some of the misconceptions that they have and feel better about the organization. And people really like Walker and they like Charlie. Fans maybe don't, but I think people really like a lot of the things that are going on in the organization, and also just the way that they use resources and are very attuned to like, we want you to be as good as possible so you can make as much money possible because that's good for us too. And they provide them with resources that they're there to help. And I think that teams are like that, but I think the Blue Jays are really striving to do that with the way that they've been run, and since the Shapiro era started, and the high performance department and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. And obviously we've seen guys bristle with it. Josh Donaldson early on did not particularly like some of the stuff with the injuries and how he was treated in terms of all of that. But I think in general it seems like players do like being here and are more fond of it once they sort of see it. So hopefully, for me, I would love to see Semien come back. I would love to see him, just I don't know what the contract looks like at this point. And that's probably why he's going to just have to wait until the end of the year anyway. Like, because just last year was such a strange year for obviously everybody, but he had a bad year. He kind of got hot at the end, but he was really bad at the start. 2019 was such an outlier for him. And now it's like, he was not great in April. He was great in May. Like, I don't know if we can assume that May is just going to carry on. That would be amazing. But there's just so much variance that can still happen between now and the end of the season that I don't know if it's a great idea to like go and sign him right now for what it looks like he should be worth. But I don't know if it's in his interest to like take that offer either. Like it probably just makes more sense to wait. But putting the qualifying offer on him gives the Jays a bit of an advantage. Presumably they're willing to not to give up the draft pick that they would get in compensation with somebody else signing him, which I think they would. It's not as big a penalty as it used to be. And so, that's sort of my guess would be like sign him to an extension in October, late October, like before he gets to free agency, maybe is a thing to do. I would love to see that, but if they go to free agency without him, that's probably a good sign for like the kind of money that they have and how they're going to approach free agency. But also, then the pressure is on to actually get something done, which they've done the last couple of years. But you can't let him walk and then come up empty on all the other options.
Do you think that with this shortstop class, this free agency being, I don't know, maybe the deepest, I can't think of a deeper shortstop class ever in free agency. Do you think it's possible that drives the prices down a little bit? Like, I can't see every single one of these guys getting a Francisco Lindor deal.
That's a good point. Yeah. I mean, I would say that, but also teams, the Padres have $200-300 million players, right? Like teams can do this if they just really have to want to, right? The Blue Jays obviously wanted Springer very much, not quite the same stratosphere in terms of the deal. And that, he was maybe hurt by the lack of options on the market. And so, that can definitely be a factor, right? Like if the Yankees and the Red Sox and the Cubs or a bunch of other teams were bidding on all the top free agents last winter, maybe it's a different story for Springer, and maybe the price goes up and maybe the Jays are priced out of it. So I think you're right. It could end up driving prices down, but also I don't know. I wouldn't want to bank on that. Yeah, absolutely.
So Alec Manoa, man, he has been just the buzz of this fan base since spring. He had such a hot spring trading and everyone's been loving what he's doing. And it's kind of funny because you're a guy, dude, all along who was like, bring him up, you cowards, right?
Well, yes, I was.
And Adam and I, it's funny because Adam and I were a little bit more cautious. We were a little bit worried that maybe he was being rushed. And especially with this call up, I mean, with the Jays being just so desperate for innings, it was hard to read if it was out of necessity or if he was truly ready. And my God, I mean, obviously he was ready. His debut went as well as it possibly could have. What did you see in him that you figured he could handle this jump? And can you see him continuing to be a solid contributor on this team for the rest of the year?
I can see him continuing. Absolutely. What I'll say about the calling people cowards and that was as much wish casting as anything, right? That was just trying to manifest that. Like, yeah. I didn't have any particular insight. Like, he was obviously very good against the Yankees and against the Tigers and those times we saw him in spring training. And for me, that is a big thing. Like, I think more when we talk about relievers, like, it's just like, people will look at reliever stats and it's more like, what is his stuff? Can he get big leaguers out? Like, that's for me, the bar to cross, not like, and I think that's why the Jays have done very well with some of the relievers that they've, picked up off the scrap heaps, because they're not necessarily looking at like, what the numbers say about his performance in the past. They're looking at what his stuff is right now. And looking at Manoa in that context in the spring was like, he can get big leaguers out, bring them up. And I also thought that a lot of the restraint was probably because people didn't realize that he pitched so much at West Virginia in 2019 in his college year before he went before he got drafted and turned pro, because he only had like 17 pro innings in Vancouver, but he had like, 115 or something like that with West Virginia. So that's like a good base for a starting pitcher, like to start to build on. And I think obviously
Yeah, he's not Simeon Woods Richardson, right? Like he's
no,
not 20.
and he's not
yeah.
Nate. And he's not Nate Pearson either, right? Like Pearson, I don't think has come anywhere near that number of innings in a season, and that's why they've been really cautious about building him up. But Manoa, obviously, you know, the minor league season, you know, didn't start until the end of April or whatever, or the start of May, and so that, you know, there's an extra month. So there's a lot. I don't think the innings were a problem when they eventually, you know, calling him up at the start of May, and it was just about the stuff. It was just, I think, just watching, especially what he was doing in the minor leagues, just only amplified the need to see what he could do against big leaguers, because he wasn't even learning. You know, you can't learn anything at the minor leagues when you're just
mowing him down.
Yeah. Like even if his pitches were not as finely located as they could be, I mean, I don't know how you learn that when nobody's going to be able to touch them anyway, right? So he kind of needs to fail a little bit before he can really reach his ceiling. But I don't know. I'd be fine with him not failing too. So
yeah, you can put me in that category too.
I think his mom's also in that category.
Oh my God, yeah.
How cool was that? Yeah, it was great.
So obviously, if you're going to pinpoint a problem on this team, pitching is a concern. And I'll be honest, this starting rotation, man, over the last 10 days is starting to look okay. Ross Stripling in his last 2 outings looked like a completely different pitcher. And I know that he figured he was tipping his pitches and he changed his delivery a little bit to try and fix that. I'm not sure if it worked or not, but it has over the last 2 days. Do you think he found something, or is he just hot?
Yeah, I'd love to think that he found something, but it's not only is a small sample size, but it's also like guys were studying up on a different Ross Stripling, right? And so I could see the league adjusting back to that adjustment that he's made. You know, he's just not an overpowering guy. He's got to get by on deception and on location. And so I'm not convinced by 2 starts or 2 outings, I guess, because he used an opener in the previous one. But like, I'm not convinced that that's perfect and he's going to be fine. But that's great. I mean, keep going with that until you have to make another adjustment.
Exactly.
He's still a guy who, you know, in an ideal world, he's your long man out of the bullpen. Like that's a pretty manager-proof roster right there when you start to do stuff like that. And that's where I think the Jays want to go.
But yeah, don't really have that option right now.
Not so much, no. So I think Stripling looks. I can't believe I'm saying this. I wouldn't have said this 2 weeks ago or even a week ago. But yeah, like, you know, give him some run in the rotation, especially until, you know, he has another terrible game, which I think is completely in him.
Yeah,
I'm definitely not. The rope would definitely be shorter for him than some of the other guys like Manoa. I think you just kind of let him go. But also the way that the schedule sets up is that you get through Chicago, the White Sox, and Boston. Then it's like Baltimore, Seattle, Baltimore.
Oh,
the All-Star break for Manoa, and I think also the 5th starter. So if that's Stripling, that bodes
give
well
me
for
some
him
Orioles.
Well.
Yeah.
So now that Manoa's up, is he just here for good, or he gets infinity leash for the rest of the season?
I don't think so. I mean, just based on the way they handled Pearson, that there's a limit to how much failure there can be. But I mean, we haven't seen any failure yet, right? So I don't see why he wouldn't be up for the long haul. But, you know, obviously things can change pretty quickly. But yeah, he just looks like a big leaguer too. I mean, I know that's sort of like hackneyed cliche and stuff that when I started writing about the Blue Jays decades
you sound
ago,
like Pat Tabler here.
Yeah, but he does have that. He does have that mound presence. He's enormous. He's got, you know, and that was really evident in AAA, where the guys are, you know, just they're younger, they're not as big, they're not as confident, and it just, you know, that was, you know, he just looked humongous on the mound out there, and I think really added to it. But obviously, you know, doing it against Aaron Judge means that it's not just about that, right?
Yeah. I mean, we just finished spending 5 minutes talking about pitching woes here, but I did wish to bring up Hyun-Jin Ryu, because the guy, I just don't feel like he gets enough praise. Like, he is just so solid and so instrumental on this team. And it was kind of cool too, because we talked with Ben Freakley and Jimmy Van Ostrin, a couple of the mental performance coaches for the Jays last week. And we had a listener question for them, and we've actually got some for you too that we'll get to at the end here. But they were asked who has the most impressive mental approach and toughness to the game on this team. And both, without even thinking about it, were like, Ryu. His prep and his mindset is elite, they said. What has impressed you about the big South Korean since Toronto brought him in and made him a Blue Jay?
He's just really good. I guess like sort of on a base like, but no, he's he's one of those guys. He's a joy to watch pitch, right? Just the way that he carves guys up, the way that he keeps them off balance. But it's not just one thing, right? It's not, it's everything that he does is so impressive, especially the way the game is going. That just to see a guy who's a lot of days 88, 89, carving big league hitters up, carving the best hitters in the world up. It's amazing. I mean, it's still early days, but I was thinking about this the other day watching it start. I'm like, he doesn't have a lot of more time to go before he's like my favorite Blue Jays starter ever. And that's recency bias, but those are the kind of guys that the Marco Estradas of the world, where it's like, this doesn't make sense that he's doing this, and it's awesome. But yeah, it's just you couldn't build a better pitcher without if your limitation was he has to throw in the low 90s or upper 80s like that. It's just,
I mean, there are so many bummers about this pandemic, but buddy, one of the biggest ones has got to be the fact that Toronto fans just don't get to go see him at Rogers Center. Like, they missed 2 of his 4 years on this team. Talk about deserving it though.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, it's like, how is that? The contract already looks like it's a win. Like, yeah, which was, it was risky is not the right word. Teams can afford those deals, but he's a guy with a lot of injury history, and you worry about guys sometimes coming from the NL to the AL. I generally don't, but you have to account for the fact that they're facing pitchers that the lineups aren't necessarily as good. Like, the numbers are going to take a hit based on the quality of the competition they're going to face, and it really hasn't happened for him at all. He's just and he's shown why. He any pitch in any count, and just makes guys.
I mean, in all honesty,
weak contact looks foolish. Like, it's real fun to watch him pitch.
The only time I can think of him falling apart was game 2 of that playoff series.
Yeah. It seemed like they had an inkling of that too, with the way that they set him up with the extra rest and something like going on right there.
Yeah, that whole scenario was weird.
I've been just sort of paying attention to, like, the starts where, I mean, not even just the extra rest starts, but like the starts where he's touching 92, 93 even, generally seem to be much better than when he's a little bit lower. Like that extra velocity definitely means something for him. And it's the, when he can reach back and even just that, with the separation from his changeup and just the cluelessness that people have, the hitters have, what's coming next. It just makes a huge difference. And yeah, he is great. We are very lucky to be able to watch him, and unlucky to not be able to watch him up close.
Yeah. It's there's no greater feeling than watching a hitter walk away just shaking their head after a Ryu at bat, just being like, how? Like, what?
It is kind of amazing though to think about, like, the last time Blue Jays fans saw the team was at the end of 2019, and like this the world of difference that they're going to come back to. It's like Manoa is here, Ryu is here, like the lineup is ridiculous. Vlad is now an MVP candidate. Springer, like it's just gonna, like, it's just really gonna hit the gas, I think, as soon as fans are allowed back in that stadium, because there is so much every day to go out and be thrilled as a Blue Jays fan for.
Oh, well, it's a completely different team. I mean, we were lucky enough to talk to Tim Meza at the beginning of the season about his Tommy John surgery and rehabbing and stuff like that. And even he brought up, last time he pitched with this team was back in 2019. He's like, I don't even recognize the bullpen, like, other than Baraki, like, who's my bud, like, there's nobody there. Huh? So should be good to see baseball come back to Toronto. Do you think there's any way it happens in September, or?
Well, it sounds like they're letting people in to watch the Leafs tonight. So,
yeah.
So I think, if you're the Blue Jays, you kind of are like, well, you've set a bit of a precedent there about, like, fully vaccinated people are allowed to go in and do that. And that's obviously, we could talk about why that's happening or who is in charge and what but I'm sure we don't want to do that. But if you're the Blue Jays, I think you're definitely looking at that and being like, well, now we have something we can use to make our case. And if you feel that that's okay, then I think that probably is a good signal for the Jays that they may be able to get back in Toronto. But
they would sell out every game in September. Like if this team's
Oh,
competitive and there's the hunger of not seeing them in 2 years.
Absolutely. No,
So
it would be wild. It would be wild. It would be
Yeah, it'd be the best.
just insane. Yeah. Looking forward to it. Hope it happens. Sounds like vaccine, second doses are getting moved up.
Yeah.
It sounds like
Things are finally happening.
I don't, and I'm hopeful for the first time in a long time, I think. And it's weird because it's
Me
about
too.
It's about this stupid thing with the Leafs letting these fans in. But honestly,
Yeah.
if you can do that, then if you say you have your second dose and you're 2 weeks past it, that's going to be like August for a lot of people. Why can't they go to the games?
Exactly.
It could really happen. And yeah, I think Adam, you're totally right. Like it will be bonkers.
Bonkers. Yeah.
How are you feeling about the bullpen these days? I mean, in April, it was one of the best in baseball and has taken a substantial step back from them. Do you feel like this is more representative of what it really is, or do you think there's a medium between these two that's really what this pen is?
Yeah, probably the medium one. I mean, like David Phelps and Baraki being gone was a big loss. Like it just helps, put guys in better position to succeed. Like the Charlie stuff, like we were talking off it's like a lot of fans would have Romano pitch every inning that a starter is not in, right? And it's like you can't do that. Like people yesterday were talking about have him close.
Yeah, why didn't he close both games? It's like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, it's like somebody was like, "Wow, Sparky Lyle," and like literally in my mention was talking about Raleigh Fingers and Sparky, and I'm like, those guys didn't throw 97 with movement and didn't have, Romano was on the IL earlier, and like he's had arm issues, and everybody's had arm issues, and I think that there is definitely sense in not grinding him to dust, obviously, but in the game nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to hear that. They just want here's the one guy who can get out. And yeah, I think having Phelps not there, obviously, Merriweather was just such a brief flash that
did he even exist?
Yeah. No, that's Kirby Yates, but I think it'll get better. It will definitely get better. But it's probably showing now more than what it's really like. I think
Phelps going down for the year was sure a hit after all these other injuries. Like he was a guy that actually stepped up and really filled some high leverage innings that I wasn't really expecting out of him.
Like when you have Phelps and Baraki in place and getting the innings that Bergen and Piamps and Castro are getting, like that's a big difference. That's a big difference. And they will get to a point where they will build that, the cream rises to the top. I find, with bullpens a lot of times, like they'll find guys, they'll get guys who can do that. But right now, they're in a bit of a tough spot with the injuries, and they just, some of those guys had a nice April, but that's probably all they are.
Yeah. I know we talked Manoa. He really could be a game changer, obviously. Do you see any other top prospects in this system that might wind up contributing in a meaningful way in 2021? A Gabriel Morano or anything like that, perhaps?
I think he's probably farther off. I think, we talked about Groshans and Martin a little bit, or we mentioned them regarding Semyon. I think those are guys. Maybe this is too much of a luxury, but I would love to see the Jays like put obstacles in their way and force them to, hit their way onto the team, right? Like if Semyon is there, then that's a good problem to have. If you're like, well, we got to find a spot for Groshans.
Yeah.
It's like, hint, it's third base. But like, Moreno, I think is farther back. It's Pearson is really the big one. I think is gonna be able to come up and help next, hopefully.
Yeah,
agreed. Which it hasn't sounded like it's going great.
No,
since he's been down in Buffalo, which is good. Better for him to work stuff out down there than say try to close out a one-run game in Cleveland.
So you just touched on it really briefly there, and we might as well get into it. Are you a Kevin Biggio guy? I know Adam and I both like him. We think he's great. His versatility is fantastic, and I see him rebounding. He's probably not a third baseman, but I think he's valuable on this team. Where do you sit with Biggio?
Yeah, I think he's valuable. I think he's more valuable as the versatile bench kind of guy than he is an everyday player. I think that I understand why people are soft on him a lot. Like I kind of don't understand why pitchers walk him so often. Like obviously part of that's a skill, part of that's pitchers just walk guys, but like I think especially some of the power numbers are okay, but if you look at like the Statcast stuff, the exit velocities, especially the stuff against good velocity, he just doesn't really do much damage. I don't think enough to justify being walked 15% of the time. Like if I'm a pitcher, I'm like, why are we allowing him to do this? Why is he on base so much? Why aren't we throwing him stuff and making him
hit
punish
his way
us?
on?
Yeah. And maybe that's also Pat Tabler-esque, but like I could see that coming down. But I also think he showed he was pretty productive last year and the year before, and right now I think especially he had the hand thing, like he took that ball off the hand in Kansas City, which maybe can affect guys' powers. They've got the de-juiced ball or whatever's going on with the ball, which may not help him right now, which they'll probably screw around with more because that's just what they seem to do. And yeah, I can see I think he could totally be a valuable player, and I think he gives them. This is something I've written about this like a million times. I feel in the last month, but like I keep going back to this interview Dante Bichette had last September, like a Zoom session that he had where it was just like 30 minutes of them asking him about hitting and him talking. It was really good. And what he said about Biggio was that he really liked the way that he gives it just a different look, like not just because he's a lefty, but just because of how you have to approach him as a pitcher, and it just you can't pitch to Biggio the way that you pitch to Teoscar or Vlad and try to get the same success. Like he just he forces pitchers to do something else, and in Biggio or in Bichette's view, that's a good thing. That's what you want to do. You want to make it difficult for the pitcher, and he having to be like, oh, okay, this guy, that I think helps. And I think that Biggio is not necessarily unique there. Like that's not his skill obviously is he's elite at controlling the zone and knowing whether a ball is a strike or not. So there's lots of good things about him. But yeah, I think the everyday thing on a championship team, you would probably need to have better players. So
fair. That's fair. So this front office, in my opinion anyways, is on the right track. They have their doubters, right? People said that they would never spend big bucks, and then that Springer $150 million contract kind of silenced that critique. But there's also folks who think that this front office won't spend prospect capital to shore up needs when it needs to. And that is something that they have yet to prove they will do. Do you think Atkins and Shapiro have it in them to trade some high-end prospects for pitching or whatever their needs may be this season? Or we can even go longer than that. If they're not going to do it this season, do you think that they will do it in the next year or two?
Well, I'm glad we went longer than that. Because yeah, I think that I think that they will. I think that like Kendall Williams for Stripling in that deal, I think is maybe one where, and this is where I think maybe fans differ from where I'm at least, which is that I don't think that the industry is trading tons of guys from top 10 lists for each team. Like top 30 guys are the new top 10 guys. I think in terms of trades, like I don't think teams are going to be giving away. Or not giving away, but like I think people talk about Max Scherzer could potentially be on the trade market like that. Maybe that's a guy that I think about. Could I give up a top 10 guy? Like if he's really the guy to put me over the top. But like I think the days of like getting Gleyber Torres for 2 months of Chapman is like that wasn't that long ago. But I think those days are gone. Like I don't think teams value players in the same way. I think that the younger years of control, the cheaper guys, the prospects are just too valuable. And so I wouldn't hold it against Shapiro and Atkins if they're not out there trading Miguel Geraldo or Elvis Martinez or some of those guys who are really high end prospects. Like those are guys that I would love to see them keep. And I don't know if it's necessarily necessary to do that either, right? Like I think they did well last year getting Walker and getting Robbie Ray. I would like them to be a little more ambitious this year if they're really in it, probably. But getting those guys for like practically nothing. I think Bergen went for Ray, right? And then came back. Even Steven Matz, like that's a useful pitcher, not a game changer, though he's pitched really well. Yeah. But they gave up guys. Sean Green-Foley's having a great year for the Mets apparently, but guys who were getting squeezed off the roster anyway. And I think that's sort of the pool that they're maybe more looking at. And so I'm not terribly concerned if they're not out there shopping their best prospects. I think it's probably smarter in most cases, unless it's someone with a fantastic player with a lot of term that you don't want to move those guys anyway. So I think they will do it to an extent, to the extent that the industry does. But it was also a little disappointing this year to watch like the Padres put together an offseason that was like, whoa, this is what the Blue Jays should be doing going out.
What they got Darvish for anyways.
Yeah. But I think that's an example of why you don't necessarily need to be trading your highest end prospects.
Yeah. So you mentioned him, Robbie Ray. My goodness, what a godsend that man has been for this team. If he continues to pitch this way, do you make a contract offer to him? Would you be trying to extend him?
I mean, they seem to really like him. I wouldn't be surprised. Like I'm hesitating because I'm like, I've never been a huge Robbie Ray guy, just because it's tough to watch sometimes when he's at his worst, when he's walking guys. And but yeah, if he keeps pitching like this, that's a different story. Like he's been great, and it goes back to what I was saying earlier about guys liking working with Walker, guys liking the organization once they get here. I would be totally fine with that, to be honest. And we've seen with Pearson and with just watching baseball over the years, like there are interesting arms coming up, but I don't think you're like, well, we can't sign Ray because we got Simeon Woods Richardson.
Yeah.
So I would be very, very, very okay with them re-signing him for sure. He's maybe the kind of guy, the kind of mid-tier guy that they would exactly look at, I think. So
maybe
I feel like I'm sounding down on Robbie Ray, which is just because I'm sort of thinking more about like the bigger picture, because lately he has been incredible.
No, Andrew, I get it because he always has been a guy that every once in a while it looks like he found it and then it's gone again, right? So you almost wish to just let him prove it a little bit longer. But yeah, if he continues to be
Tyler
this guy,
Tyler Chatwood looked real great for about 6 weeks.
Yeah.
And now it's like, oh right, Tyler Chatwood, right?
Yeah. Well, it's funny how there's guys on this bullpen. I mean, we talk about Rafael Dolis all the time. Like Adam and I quite like him actually, but he is not an easy man to watch pitch, right? Like he takes forever. He never gives into a batter. He'll walk two before like he just he's a guy that if you just look at his stat line, you're like, okay, this guy deserves to be in the bullpen. But sometimes watching him pitch, you're like, oh.
Oh, absolutely. And also just because it takes forever. It's just the worst when it's going badly and also taking forever. Like
Rafael, I'll throw a pitch when I'm damn well good and ready, Dolis. Yeah.
Like, at least implode quickly, please.
Yeah. Can you pull a Chatwood for us?
Yeah.
Just really, yeah.
We'll bring you back out the next inning anyway.
All right, my man. I really do appreciate your time and you coming on the podcast here. We've got some listener questions for you. You're all right on time for a few more minutes here?
Absolutely, yeah.
Awesome. All right. So this first one is from Kate in Victoria. She says, hey, Andrew, big fan. I subscribe to your newsletter. So you got one.
All right.
Do you think
let's be serious.
do you think the Blue Jays make moves at the trade deadline that we might see some subtractions from their everyday lineup, or should we expect just prospect packages to go?
I would say probably more prospect packages. Maybe guys off the 40-man who are not here, but like generally teams are going to look to improve their roster, right?
Yeah.
Not take away from it. But the one exception I would say is that, and it feels impossible at this point, but if everybody's healthy, the outfield is a bit crowded, right? So maybe there's something that makes sense there. Maybe you can move a Gurriel, though I think that's probably either he keeps playing. Well, he's been better lately, but if he plays,
he has.
But if he plays poorly, you're sort of selling low on him. If he plays well, then you want him.
You want him in the lineup.
So I think that kind of makes all those deals tougher. But there's definitely guys on the 40-man that will be in play. Your Jonathan Davis, Riley Adams, like those are kind of big league-ish guys who I think they would look to move. But for the most part, I think it's probably. I just think that's generally how that goes, is prospect stuff, and maybe it's more like it's the off season where you're going to trade somebody, from the roster, which we could definitely see next winter.
Okay, so this next question, and if I butcher this name, my apologies. Shaylee out of Moncton, New Brunswick. Some East Coast love for you here. She says, hey, Andrew, cool you're on the show. When you look at this team's bullpen, do you think it's safe to say Jordan Romano is the highest leverage arm in the pen? Is he the unofficial closer at this point?
Well, after looking at yesterday's game, I'm gonna have to say, yeah. Yeah, I mean, he is the one guy I certainly trust above everybody else, and I think that's where Charlie's at too. I think, closer by committee gets a bad reputation because it does sort of not work very often.
Yeah.
But I understand why they're kind of like not making him just a ninth inning guy, because he's very useful in other situations and in higher leverage situations earlier on. So I don't know if I expect him to be the closer like traditionally, but yeah, he's definitely the best arm in the pen right now, and and the one that literally everybody just wants to pitch every inning. Like it's every time. It's like this Romano could have done better there. It's like, well, you don't want his arm to fall off.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's great. Been a revelation. It's been awesome.
Yeah, he has been. Canadian boy too. Which is always nice. Yeah. So your last question here is from Barry in Salmon Arm, BC, and he says, "Hey Andrew, curious what you think about the whole Yerman Mercedes Tony LaRussa ordeal."
Oh, I think Tony LaRussa is an idiot, and I can't believe that the White Sox hired him. Obviously, that's just an owner gone mad, which is Reinsdorf has been a weirdo for a long time, and he gets what he wants a lot of times. And he's got an ear in the commissioner's office, and he's not good for the game, I don't think, the Chicago White Sox owner. And I don't know why LaRussa is there, and I would be upset if I was a White Sox fan. I think the lounge thing, the Loretta's Lounge being changed to LaRussa's Lounge crazy? Was just like, I mean, just so. No, I would say tone deaf, but you can't be tone deaf when you just don't care. Like, that's different. You're not just obliviously doing it. It's like, the guy with the DUIs we're going to name the bar after him. It's just insane. And so, yeah, I'm very happy with those with those kind of dinosaurs being aged out of the sport. And
yes, they belong in museums, not fine.
Yeah, great. Had a career that got him into the Hall of Fame on merit, I guess. For whatever managers could do. But the White Sox have a really fun team, and I would be really excited to cheer for them as like a non-Blue Jays team that I enjoy watching. Except they have a manager who I do not like at all.
Well, Andrew, when he was hired, I know Adam and I were talking about because it was such a weird move, right? And we were like, well, I guess we need to wait and see how this plays out before we can actually judge. But it seems like a weird mix, especially like you look at that young core. I mean, guys like Tim Anderson, they're bat flipping on doubles, right? Like it's a fun, exciting team to watch. And you bring in this guy who's going to be like, what are you doing? Right? Like,
And the unwritten rule stuff like the Mercedes is just, I don't know how you have a manager who I assume he's like, how does he not lose the room, right? And I think that's sort of we talked about Charlie, and we could talk about tactics a lot, but there's more to what a manager does than just that. And I just can't see how those guys are
playing for him.
Not rolling their eyes every time he says something, or and I don't imagine that's a great way to have your clubhouse work.
I heard a take that was interesting. I don't agree with it, but I heard that this is all premeditated, that LaRussa's a genius and is getting the team to rally around disliking him. And that's what thoughts? No.
I hate to go back to hockey, like every Canadian sports writer does about things, but it's like Mike Keenan tried to that was like the thing for him for years, and it was just like, teams would try it and it wouldn't work, and he would wear it as welcome in a year, and then another team would try it until it just became painfully obvious that that's stupid, and I think that's
As a Flames fan, I got to see that be stupid last.
So okay.
I know. Andrew, thank you so much, man, for taking the time to talk with us. We really appreciate it. All the best in the future.
Yeah, anytime, man. Thanks so much.